Hi, it's Will from Practical Performance Car, and I'm here with Robin Izzard and his fantastic looking Jag Coupe. Robin, this is a replica of a British Leyland touring car, is that right?
Yes. Ultimately, in 1976, Leyland went to a contractor, Broadspeed, and Broadspeed were given the task of creating what turned out to be 3 vehicles for European touring car. The principle of European touring car was it was a whole host of rounds throughout Europe, and they had a dominance with the BMW 3 litre, what we would term CSL, also known as a Batmobile. And for whatever reason, Leyland decided that they want to take it on. So at that stage, obviously they didn't have a competitions department that could handle it. So Ralph Broad, who was had a facility in Southam, who was very synonymous with Dolomites and Ford Capris and things like that, was tasked with the job of actually creating the vehicles.
And they decided to use the Jaguar XJ Coupe as the base car.
They did, which was, I think, was a surprise to some people. I think his choice would have been an XJS, but that was still in its very early infancy. So yes, I don't think it was the easiest of jobs to actually harness this beast. They put a lot of power into it. They were 550 horsepower.
And this was the XJs were a V12 5.3 Jaguar engine, weren't they?
This is a 2-door, because obviously there was a 4-door option of the Series 2 XJ6 at the same time. And one of the other things that was quite interesting is obviously they needed to get the weight down. That was quite imperative on any form of motorsport. And there was I suppose in some respects, the stories that come back now, and what are we now, 48 years later, people are turning around saying, yes, it could have been a very competitive car. It could have been a contender. Could have been a contender. But after 18 months, Leyland just turned around and said, no, enough is enough. After too many breakages, rear axle, engine, etc., they just basically pulled the plug on it. And the other thing was that regulations didn't allow dry sumps
at the time.
At that time.
So it never won anything.
Would dominate and get pole. First and second place pole would always be a Jaguar for that period. I think I'm right in saying that it's about second was the best it got. But its main Achilles heel was rear axle as much as anything.
But it did look absolutely fantastic, as you can see. So how did you start when you wanted to recreate it? You presumably looked for a sound XJ Coupe?
Yes. Along the way I built a few different bits and pieces. As I got that bit older, thinking, hang on, there's still 2 or 3 on my list. And this was about 4 or 5 years ago. And my choice at that stage was a Cologne Capri, which people may know as the big V6 with the big wings and in white and blue, or the Jaguar. The problem you got with Jaguar is that they're synonymous with corrosion. So to try and find a body shell that was reasonably substantial was a difficult part. And the other thing is, of course, what we didn't want was a sunroof. And you notice with this one, there's no sunroof. And quite a lot of the vehicles, whether it was the dealer or whether it was the manufacturer, at that time, popped sunroofs into them.
They quite often had with Basto rollback roofs.
Correct, yeah. There was all different sorts. And very often the dealer would do that for the customer rather than a factory sunroof.
Now, the original race cars were, as I say, V12 Jag 5.3. Well, were they expanded or were they still 5.3?
No, they're 5.3
but you haven't used a Jaguar engine.
I haven't used a Jaguar engine.
Why is that?
And I'll be brutally honest.
You're going to upset people here. Why have you not used a Jaguar engine?
It does upset a few purists. You know, modern day thinking is it put whatever you want into it. The thing that focused my attention was the budget. Because when I actually went to the engine guys and said, I'd like V12, I want 550 horsepower. And when they start talking about £60,000, £60,000 for a full race engine to create that, because I hadn't even got an empty block, I'd got nothing. What I did, shopped around. A friend of mine had an LS3, the lovely Chevrolet LS3 at 480 horsepower, sitting on a rack, unused.
That's the kind of friends you need.
So I sort of procured that, and then the other thing that's quite interesting is you think, right, I've got an engine. But then, of course, you need the gearbox. And once you've got a gearbox, you need a bell housing. And then you need a thrust. And then you need a flywheel. And then you need a 2-plate clutch. So all in all, it's not as easy as just buying an engine. It's all the other bits and pieces. One of the benefits is that the wiring harness is generic from Chevrolet. So that's a plug and play. Everything's labelled, plug it in, feed it with 12 volts, and away you go. So there are some benefits from having modern day technology.
And what is the transmission? What did you end up with?
It's a Tremec T56, which is a 6-speed gearbox.
So it's still a manual?
Still a manual, yes. So we also had to put into that, because originally this would have been an automatic, so then you need to go into pedal box. And what I chose to do on this was just get a generic race pedal box and fit that onto the floor, binning off the original Jaguar pedals that were installed at that time.
And you mentioned that back axles were a problem on the original cars. What have you got on this?
Well, this is just a limited slip diff with the original XJS frame, subframe and diff unit in there. Right. Everything was rebuilt. Yeah. So it's all been re-rubbered and poly bushes and all the rest of that.
Well, I mean, you're not racing it, so presumably
no,
you're not
I don't.
You take it on track days, though, don't you?
Yes, we do. One of the things, I have a friend who races, and I've seen the budget you need to race. Oh, yeah. And even at low-level club stuff, £550 is the entry fee. Then you need your tyres, then you need breakages. So it's budget that stops me, really, in all honesty. And a track day, £230, go there, blast around as much as you want. So a couple of times a year I'll take it on a track day, and it handles very well in that respect. Yeah.
Well, I think it's time we went for a drive.
Okay, fine by me.
Thanks, Robin. That was absolutely fantastic. The noise of this thing is, sends shivers up and down your spine.
Yeah. I have to say that, unfortunately, I've never been on the outside of it, but from the inside, it's quite something.
Well, that's the one thing I've got over you, then.
Yes, indeed.
So thanks very much. Cheers.
Fine. Thank you very much for your time.
If you like what we're doing here at Practical Performance Car, please like, subscribe, and share our videos. And if you like it even a little bit more than that, please consider becoming a member on Patreon. You get extra behind the scenes footage, written articles, more in-depth features, and it starts from just £2 a month, which is not even a cup of coffee in a very cheap canteen. Thanks a lot. See you next time.